Hello and welcome to this edition of Joy in Our Town. I'm Ferrell, Tata, your host, and I am delighted to be here today with the two Michelles. We have Michele Credle and Michele Marlow with the Weston A. Price Foundation. And our issue today is health, and we're going to be talking in this segment about the benefits of coconut oil. Welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Before we get started, the Weston A. Price Foundation, I'm sure some of the viewers are not familiar with that. Can you explain, Michele, a little bit about what that is?
The Weston A. Price Foundation is a 501(c) charity organization that educates people on the foundations of nutrient-dense fundamental foods based on Dr. Weston A. Price's studies all around the world.
And why is it important to our health to pay attention to the oils we cook with?
Because if you're not oiled properly, you will not function properly.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, I mean, you talk about like bottled oils. You know, our common oils are soy, corn. You know, that's usually what we pull off the shelf as those kinds of oils. And usually those go rancid as soon as they get in the bottle. So you want stable oils like coconut oil and, you know, to kind of help you digest your food properly, because if you don't have the proper oils, you're not going to be able to digest nutrients properly.
And can you explain a little bit about the difference between saturated oils and hydrogenated oils?
Michele, you got that one. Saturated fats were given a really bad rap in the media back when we had, you know, radical rates of obesity and cardiovascular disease happening. They consider because saturated coconut oil is 2/3 saturated oil. Here's the thing, is that it's lauric acid. Lauric acid in the body is what we call a neutral deterrent to all health issues because it's converted to monolaurin. Makes us antibacterial, antifungal, antibacterial, and antiprozoan. What that means is that disease can't run rampant in us if we have the right type of oil that's feeding our cells. So the reason that you want saturated fats, only specific ones that are treated properly, such as raw butter, coconut oil, and palm kernel oil, are that they actually feed our cells. When you get the imbalance between hydrogenated oils, it's mainly the processing. You know, seed oils, it takes a lot of extraction. There has to be some heat involved in doing that. When you do that, you change all the bonds that make an oil what it is, and so it oxidates. And when it oxidates, then it changes its complete structure, and it's not healthy for us.
Okay, now the coconut oil that you mentioned, that you're hearing more and more about that. So it's not just a phase or a fad, that this is something that's really important because of new research?
New research and old research.
Mm-hmm. How did it come to light, and why are they talking about it now versus 10 years ago?
Well, a larger part of that, in my personal opinion, and I'll let Michele expand too, but in my opinion, it's that we looked at the Asian nations. We looked at other nations where these are the only oils that they had, and we started saying, it's not working here. Our numbers of obesity, our cardiovascular diseases, they're changing. You know, they're warping. They're mutating into other diseases. Why aren't they getting better if we took these things out of food? And what people forgot to realize is that without fat in food, you don't absorb any nutrients to begin with. And when you start replacing it with bad, rancid fat, to get oil from a soybean, if you've ever looked at a soybean or ate edamame, there's got to be a lot of processing that happens. It's the same as comparing nutrient-dense food to nonsense processed food. If it must be processed, we don't need it. Coconut oil doesn't have to be processed.
Another big one that's, you know, everyone seems to want to talk about now is canola oil, which comes from the rapeseed. And you talk about processing. We're pulling and, you know, they're soaking and getting there. It takes a lot to get that oil out of that rapeseed. And really, I guess maybe the reason why coconut oil didn't become something bigger quicker is because we've been told forever that fat's bad for us. And, you know, stay away from fat. Don't eat fat. And really, we need that fat. We need coconut oil to help us digest things. That's why, you know, we can't digest fat properly like we used to be able to. You know, it's really kind of a combination of issues. And I think the biggest one was a fat fear. We had a fat fear for a long time, and that's kind of, we're all awakening to that now.
Now, okay, you talk about butter. I mean, butter has a really bad name. All kind of butter, or is there a specific kind of butter that we should be eating?
You want raw grass-fed butter. Animals weren't meant to eat grain. They were meant to eat grasses. That's how God designed their bodies. He didn't design them to eat grain. When they eat grain, their bodies go into a state of acidosis, which keeps them out of balance. You've heard of alkaline and acid levels in your body being set at proper levels, keep your pH right. Same has to happen in an animal. If the animal's diseased, then we're going to have those same diseases. In the state of acidosis, cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, they all are present when our bodies are in that state. Well, if the animal is in that state, we don't need to consume it. Therefore, we don't need those grain and corn finished steaks. We need grass-fed steaks from birth to slaughter. They need to be done exactly the same way. We're not meant to consume it. They're not meant to consume it.
Now, and going back to the oils, so the coconut oil, I mean, olive oil, flaxseed oil, there are some good oils. Even avocado oil are okay, the way I understand it, but there are certain, they should not be heated. Is that right? Coconut oil is one of the few oils that can be heated.
Right.
Can you explain why that is and what happens?
There's a difference. The oils that you're talking about that we don't want heated, like olive oil, unrefined olive oil, shouldn't go above 165. Now understand, all oils should be unrefined or cold pressed. If they're not, you need to stay away from them. But they are all long chain fatty acids. It takes our bodies and our livers a lot more work to convert them, whereas medium chain fatty acids, MCFAs or MCTs, that's what coconut oil is, that's what palm kernel oil is, and that's what real grass-fed butter is. When we get those, the body and the liver say, hi, because they convert them automatically into energy. It's not a fat that gets stored on your body. It's a fat that you use for energy. Remember the old concept, I eat carbohydrates so that I can go.
Right.
The problem is the liver converts them into glucose, and then therefore we have issues with diabetes. It doesn't work that way with coconut oil. The lauric acid in it, which is 12 parts that, when it converts into monolaurin, that's the only thing we know of in all of history that combats the flu or influenza. It kills it on the spot. Also kills HIV on the spot.
Wow.
Kills herpes. We know these things for facts. They've been in the media, they've been in scientific mainstream for over 60 years. Because of that, then the ketones work to keep us from having diabetes in any way, shape, or form. So therefore, you have your body working, as I said in the beginning. If it's oiled properly, it'll function properly.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. So, okay, you mentioned a few. What are some other long-term benefits to using the coconut oil?
Well, I mean, a big one is the Alzheimer's risk, because actually recently they've been saying that Alzheimer's is diabetes type 3, because Alzheimer's is essentially our brains cannot process glucose anymore. And the ketones in the coconut oil actually help us process or keep because our brains are, mostly fat, it helps it, Alzheimer's patients have actually improved using coconut oil. Not maybe even if you're worse off in Alzheimer's, you might still see benefits, but if you get it early, you can actually reverse that. And that goes for a lot of things as well, too. Like even autism has seen improvement with coconut oil, because that's a neurological problem as well. So really, it's just a really good overall fat.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Right now, people that are watching, you're recommending that they go out and get some coconut oil. But if you went to their pantries right now and you found a variety of other oils, are there some that you would say you can keep those, and then others like maybe canola oil that you would say get this out of your pantry right now? What would you say?
Easily. First, get an unrefined extra virgin coconut oil. Mm-hmm. You need it. It needs to become a mainstay in your house regularly. The benefits are phenomenal. It's just like when we first tell kids in the beginning that we're going to feed them a multivitamin to help them when they only want chicken nuggets and French fries. You need this as well, even if you have the other oils. Soybean oil, throw it out. Throw out anything with soy. Mm-hmm. Anything that has any level of soy, it needs to leave immediately. And on the Weston A. Price Foundation, you'll find that there's a Soy Alert initiative to educate you on the myths and the facts about soy.
So how important, and I know you're alluding to some of this, but can you just specifically talk about the importance of fats and oils in our diet?
Well, I'll quote after Dr. Mary Enig, who co-wrote Nourishing Traditions with Sally Fallon, who's the president of Weston A. Price. She wrote a book called Know Your Fats, the essential primer to proper nutrition. If you don't have your oils right, forget it. They are essential. They are what you have to have. You can eat the very best salad in the world, But if you don't have the proper oils on it, you're not even absorbing half the nutrients. You can have the very best baked dish that is even gluten-free with the proper types of flours in it, but you have the wrong oil in it, you're not absorbing any nutrients. You're hurting yourself and you're robbing your digestive system. So you get digestive diseases, excuse me. Digestive diseases are so prevalent. The rise of Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, IBS, diverticulitis, they're phenomenal. You didn't used to hear about them except as what we call end life stage diseases up until 40 years ago. Now, I personally have been in contact with ones that get diagnosed as early as 6 months old. So we're destroying our digestive system from the inside out. And we have to rethink that. We have to think, are we not just, for the terms unorganic and and organic, are we being exposed to pesticides, chemicals? Are those what are hurting us? Or is it the fact that we don't have nutrients in the food anymore and we don't have the ability to absorb them because we're not eating the right nutrient-dense oils?
And to feed off of that, I mean, you talk about children who are getting diagnosed with autism and ADHD and, you know, learning disabilities that were almost non-existent, especially when I was growing up. I know even earlier than that, my mother had never heard of this before, and it wasn't because they were being institutionalized, it's because it didn't exist. So, you know, there's a problem with these children having gastrointestinal problems, and, you know, there's a strong link between what they're eating as being a contributing factor to that, and good oils can help with that.
So now oils provide fat also, but what about nuts? What is your feeling on nuts and the type of nuts that people should eat?
You want to tackle that one?
Well, I mean, I think almond, macadamia, you know, pecan, that kind of thing. There are good nuts. You got to make sure they're raw nuts, and that you're getting the right sources. Would I say they could replace coconut oil? No. You know, there are a lot of nut oils. You just got to be careful about what you're getting. Make sure it's raw nuts, right?
Yeah, and if you're looking at raw nuts themselves as your source, you need to know that they need to be properly processed. Have you ever eaten a pecan and immediately you feel that chalkiness in the roof of your mouth? That's the protective layer of what we call phytonutrients and phytates that nut had to protect itself. Well, the problem is it reaches into our system and it causes us to have the inability to be able to absorb any of the nutrients that we know from looking at medical research are in that nut. They don't exist unless it has been soaked and then it has been dehydrated. At that point, they've been removed from it, and when you eat it, it tastes like it's been roasted. It tastes like it has butter on it, and it hasn't.
Wow.
You've removed the phytates, and therefore, you've made something that was nonsense into nutrient-dense.
That is amazing. All right, so coconut oil is do you feel equally about the right kind of butter and is it the kern oil?
Palm kernel
Palm
oil.
kernel. What is that? I'm not even really familiar with that.
Well, it's from the palm. The palm kernel is a fruit off of it, and yes, it's a good oil. The problem is again, it usually gets a lot of high heat treatment processing, so you want raw, unrefined. It's a lot harder to find when you find it in a dish as something that's prepared already for you. You're much better to stay with butter and coconut oil.
So this is absolutely amazing, and I have a gazillion more questions, but we're about out of time for this segment, and I hope you'll stay with us for the second part. But for people that are listening and they want more information, how can they reach you?
I have my own private business called Nutrition or Nonsense with Michele, and you can find me online. You can go to the Weston A. Price Foundation website, www.westonaprice.org, and find out a multitude of information. It's a lot of a resource. Michele herself has her own contacts to be able to reach her.
My business name is Bethany Apothecary, and it's basically plants and nutrition. That's what I teach. So.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today, and we are going to take a break. This is Joy in Our Town. I'm Ann Ferrell Tata, and we will be right back. Welcome back to this edition of Joy in Our Town. I'm Ann Ferrell Tata, your host, and I am here with Michele Credle and Michele Marlow of the Weston A. Price Foundation, and we are talking today about health. And this segment, we are going to be talking about eating nutrient-dense foods. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Nutrient-dense. Okay, Michele, what does the term nutrient-dense food mean?
It means food that is actually providing your body with nutrients and fuel that you need to survive and to continue to have an extremely healthy body and life.
Did you want to add anything to that, Michele?
No, I mean, I think that pretty much covers it, doesn't it?
Okay, so we are getting bombarded with all this, information on nutrients and everything. Should we subscribe to a vegetable-only diet?
No, definitely not. The proteins that we get in meat, we need those, and sometimes we don't get those when we eat vegetables mainly. I think we get scared of meat. I think a lot of people have reactions to meat, but I think that's because of where it was grazing. So if it was eating corn and soy, then you may have a reaction to it. So people kind of go towards the liquid diets and the vegetable diets because they think that's going to make them feel better. And it might for a minimum amount of time, but then you're going to start noticing other things as well, right?
Yes, because you're going to have nutrient deficiencies. At that point, you definitely will have quite a few different things that you're lacking in your diet. The only vegans I choose to say I consume my vegans, which will be the animals that I eat are grass-fed animals.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're not meant to eat grain. And a lot of people go on a gluten-free diet.
Right.
And they start eating, don't you attest to this? They start eating chicken and they start eating beef and they don't check whether it's grass-fed or grain-fed, and they don't realize that they're truly not gluten-free.
Right.
Because they're still eating the grain that the animal ate.
That's right.
So, and they don't get that, and they go, oh, gluten-free isn't working for me. Well, there's a number of contributors to why it's probably not working for you.
Yes, it's extremely important where you source your food.
All right, so can you give me some examples of some nutrient-dense foods that we should be eating?
Go ahead.
Fermented foods. You can make those by yourself. They're not that difficult to make. You can buy them in the store. Grass-fed beef, pastured chicken, pastured pork. Those are all organ meats. Those are all very important nutrient-dense food. We like to say stay out of the middle, and everyone says that I think now. Stick to the perimeter and not the aisles in the middle, because that's where your processed foods are. And you're not going to find what you need in processed foods. You may feel like it says organic, it's good for me, but there's generally something in there, maybe one thing that your body just won't be able to handle.
Will it undo everything that you've done in that day?
Almost. Depends on how much you're eating. If you become really hooked on one thing and you're not recognizing what you're putting in your body, reading labels is really, really important. And if you can't read it, don't eat it.
There you go. That's good.
Very good.
A good tip. Go ahead.
When we're discussing fermented foods, sometimes to people in what we would call modern day times, that's kind of strange. All of us have heard of someone who ate sauerkraut, with a pork loin roast. I remember hearing that as a kid too. But the sauerkraut that we're talking about isn't the one that's commercially produced. It isn't the one that's been pasteurized in a jar. We are talking about ones that have live beneficial cultures. Many people don't understand that the word ferment, if you look it up in the Webster's Dictionary, means to improve. So it may have been a cucumber in your garden, but if done the proper way, with proper nutrient-dense sea salt, proper whey, meaning W-H-E-Y, meaning the whey, it's what separates off milk from, you have casein and you have whey. Well, that actually has a lot of beneficial microbes in it. When it does, it makes your food probiotic. So when you eat that cucumber that was in the garden, that's now the pickle, all of a sudden, you've got 10 times the amount of nutrients.
That's amazing.
It's also great for people who cannot consume dairy.
Yeah.
Because you're getting your probiotics that way, and it tastes good. You can put it on anything, literally anything, and you can have a really good probiotic meal.
And the nice thing about it is you only need a tablespoon at each meal, whether it's kimchi, whether it's sauerkraut, whether it's ginger carrots, whether it's fermented okra pickles, whatever it is that is your preference, in a cultured food, you only need a tablespoon per each meal. And here's the nice thing. You can accidentally not have been able to have had a source to have gotten that grass-fed meat, had one that's grain-fed. Well, guess what? The probiotics in the fermented food digest that protein for you.
Mm-hmm. That is amazing.
So it doesn't mess up your body.
Yeah.
It's the key components to knowing how to traditionally eat, which is what kept our ancestors alive for us to be here.
Mm-hmm. That is awesome. So, we always hear about a plate should be a variety of colors. Do you ascribe to that as well?
Yes, but it depends. I could tell you that you could have cabbage, and a lot of people think cabbage and lettuce are the same thing. They're not even the same family. Cabbage is of the Brassica family. Cabbage is related to broccoli. They're cousins, okay? It's not related to lettuce. So you could say you were having some kale which needs to be eaten with fat and needs to be processed properly, or you could say that you are eating some cabbage. You're already getting 3 different things, and you can look at it as 3 shades of green. So it doesn't have to be the purple beet, the red pepper, and the point they're making in that is the bioflavonoids and the different nutrients such as vitamin A, D, vitamin B1, B2, vitamin C that are available in those. But here's the funny thing. I guarantee you think that eating spinach means that I'm going to raise my iron level. It means automatically that I'm going to be able to put that into my body. If you don't eat it with a citrus dressing that has lemon, lime, or orange in it, you don't have that vitamin C component to cut the oxalic acid. You don't even absorb at all any of the iron.
That is incredible.
So I mean, it's the key components of knowing how to eat. The old home economics class that no longer exists, it needs to re-exist.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
needs
because
to
people
become a
don't know
movement.
those. They
It's
really don't
going
know.
back to the basics. We need to go back to the basics. And we've forgotten that because we all got in a hurry and we thought processed food was the answer, and it's not. We're all hurting now.
How can you tell, you know, unless it's, I mean, you know if you're in the middle aisle and you pick up a processed package, but typically if you're visiting someone's house or if you're, you know, can you tell the difference between a processed food and a nutrient-rich, dense food?
I think we can tell by taste now, but I mean, even I can taste different oils now. I mean, you clean your palate enough, and you can tell. You just take your time and clean your palate, and you'll be able to know if it's processed or not. We try to ask as many questions as possible because we don't want to have that after effect of what we ate. So, you know, and we try not to be rude when we go to people's houses, so we don't really ask that question.
Do you have an opinion about, you know, when we talk about cabbage or broccoli and some of those, kale even, cooked versus raw, or does it matter, or both?
I think it depends on what you're cooking it in. I mean, raw is good, but if you're cooking it in coconut oil, we go back to that for a minute. You know, you're going to get more out of that vegetable than if you would just eat raw. I mean, coconut oil helps you digest, like I've mentioned. So
like if you roasted, let's say you had some broccoli and you just roasted it, does that change the nutrient makeup?
What are you roasting it in?
Just by itself on a.
No. You're not helping it. You're denaturing it.
Oh,
it's no different than popping it into a microwave at that point, which changes it to a plastic.
Oh dear.
You have to eat vegetables with a proper level of fat. If someone already has a digestive issue, I always recommend that they start eating cooked vegetables that are cooked with the proper fats. I ask them to make sure they're cooking it with an antioxidant, which means they're going to be adding fresh garlic or fresh onions. Both will work in that component and help them heal their digestive tract. But without proper fats, they're not going to heal it to begin with. So if you were asking somebody like that to start on a raw juicing, you're hurting them more than you're helping them, because you're putting their body in a state of detox. And when you do that and the liver doesn't have enough fat to go through, the liver gets way out of whack. And if it starts depending upon the fat stores on your body, and their soy and their canola, then you're going to start to have cholesterol issues. You're going to start to have other issues because the body requires that. Your cell, to replicate every day, every single cell in your body requires that. And so you have to consume the proper fats again. No matter how nutrient dense, you've read the back of that package and it's got 100 milligrams here of vitamin C, 200 milligrams of vitamin E, daily RDA has been met on this. It doesn't matter. It can have all of that in it. But if you don't have the proper fat with it to absorb it, forget it. You're not even getting 50% of it.
Okay, now y'all have so much information and so much knowledge, but can you talk to somebody who may be watching who is thinking to themselves, I want to get healthy. Everything in my pantry right now is probably not worthy, and I want to make changes, but are there some small steps and manageable steps that you can offer to start making to begin this process?
You take that and I'll expand.
I say find a friend. I remember when I found Michele, Michele was in this a little bit more than I was in the beginning. If I didn't have her, I was spending thousands of dollars on food because I was doing what the books told me, and the books were expensive. Their menus were expensive and things like that. You need to find someone who can help you with your nutrition plan and being able to say, yeah, that's good, but this is better. Because you need that. You really need somebody that you can lean on. And it's really hard to do it by yourself.
It's extremely hard to do it by yourself. Michele has spent tons of money, and she was a mom who was desperately trying to help her autistic children. So she had done drastic diets, such as gluten-free. I mean, you can just go and do a little bit to fill one shelf, am I not right, Michele, and spend over $500 real quick. And you're pretty much exchanging food for what you think is good just because there's organic or gluten-free on it. And those labels aren't really reliable, because the first thing I would tell someone if I went to their house, it's the same thing I told Michele. I go to your pantry. If it has soy, if it has canola on the box of any type, it needs to go. And when it leaves, let's start bringing back in the freshest that we can humanly bring in. Let's bring back in proper meat and dairy. Change those as quickly as you can. Only buy fish that's wild caught. Only buy meats that are completely grass-fed. Make sure they're soy-free and they're corn-free, because those are two allergens none of us need, and 95% of the time they're GMO, and none of us need genetically modified organisms at all.
Wow. So, okay, in the last couple seconds, and I'm glad you actually brought up the expense, what would you say to somebody that would say, I would like to buy grass-fed beef or meat, but it's too expensive? How would you respond to that?
I mean, in comparison to an average mother's budget, we don't spend that much more. I actually had the chance to compare my budget to someone else who swore up and down that organic was really expensive, grass-fed beef was really expensive. I only spent $250 more a month. It's not that hard. It goes back to finding someone who can help you get on track and, you know, take you to the grocery store and show you how to do it. And there are groups that will do that. Michele will do it in groups. I will do it in groups. It really takes someone that will help you find your way.
Well, Michele and Michele, thank you so much for being here with us today. And I encourage people to go to the Weston A. Price Foundation. I'm Ann Ferrell.